I own 11 long-sleeve shirts. It's July. It's 94 degrees. That's not the story. That's just where I was standing when the story started up again, which was the second shift on a Wednesday, on the floor at Corwin & Sons, under a ceiling fan that has never once cooled anybody down. The big press is called the Mihla. It's older than my father. It has a guard on it that came off in 2014 and got put back on wrong, and everybody knew that, and everybody said somebody ought to call about it. And nobody called about it. Junior Ocampo was feeding stock into it when he screamed. I don't want to make that sound like a movie. It wasn't a long scream. It was more like a man saying a word that isn't a word, one time, and then going quiet, which is worse. I was 11 feet away. I know it was 11 feet, because I'd counted the floor tiles between the mihle and the trim table about 400 times, which is a thing I do, and I'll get to that. His hand was caught, and then it wasn't caught, and there was a lot going on with his forearm, and I'm not going to walk you through it. It was bad. Everybody who came running stopped running about 4 feet out, the way people do. I know how to make a tourniquet. I learned it in a parking lot when I was 19, from somebody. I'll get there. To do it, I had to get my sleeve out of the way. There were 30-some men on that floor. 31, if you count Dale in the cage, and I do count Dale in the cage. I stood there for 2 seconds with my hand on my own cuff. I want to be real careful here, because there's a version of this where I sound brave, and I wasn't. I was doing arithmetic. 2 seconds of arithmetic about 31 men, and 1 arm, and then I rolled the sleeve up past my elbow and got down on the floor. I used Junior's shirt for the pressure. Not mine. I unbuttoned his shirt off his back with one hand while he told me about his mother. Emery. My mother's gonna. Your mother's gonna be fine. She's not gonna be fine. She's gonna be at the hospital. Then she's gonna be at the hospital and she's gonna be fine there, I said. Look at me. Not at it. At me. Am I losing the hand? No. You don't know that. No, I said. I don't. Look at me. Anyway. He did. Junior Ocampo has a face like a man who's about to tell you a joke even when he isn't, and he looked at me the whole time, and he kept talking, and I kept my knee where it needed to be, and my hands where they needed to be, and I said things like times, good times, and times you're doing good, which is what you say, which is nothing. I couldn't hear the press anymore. Somebody had killed it. I could hear the fan. Somebody upstairs had already called it in. It went out on the county line as an amputation at Corwin & Sons, second shift, and that's the part I found out later. The part I found out right then was the voice. The doors banged, and a man came in fast and low and said, "Everybody take a step back for me, please." And I did not look up, because I had a job, and also because I already knew. 4 years and 1 month, and I knew him by 8 words about stepping back. He came in on my left. He put a bag down. He didn't move my hands. He said, "Keep doing exactly that." Then he said, "Junior, look at me. It's 4:12. You're okay." "I'm here," he said the time out loud. I didn't know yet that he does that. I thought he was talking to somebody else. There was a woman with him, Deb, older, gum. She got the line in. He got the rest of it done, and he narrated absolutely none of it to anybody except Junior. And every so often he'd say the time again, flat as a bus announcement, and every time he did it, Junior's shoulders came down about an inch. At some point he said, "Emery, I've got it. Let go on 3, and I let go on 3. Nobody in that building calls me Emery. My mother calls me M. The shop calls me Doc. There's a man on first shift who has called me Chief for 6 years, and I have never corrected him." 3 syllables. M or I. Half the floor looked up, and I could feel them looking, and I stood there with Junior's blood on both forearms, in front of 31 men with my sleeve rolled to the elbow. They took him out. It went quiet in the way a room goes quiet when the machines are off in the middle of a shift, which is a sound in itself. I pulled my sleeve down before I washed my hands. I want to say that again, because it's the only honest thing in this whole first part. My arms were wet, and I pulled the sleeve down over them, and buttoned the cuff, and then I went to the sink. Then I stood under the fan and watched it go around. 1, 2, 3. Then I stopped. He came back at the end of shift. 11:40. Still in the uniform, hair flat where the ball cap had been. He's got the hand, Anders said. He's going to be mad about the scar for about a year, and then he's going to show it to people at parties. Okay, you did the right thing with the shirt. It was closer, I said. That was a lie, and he let me have it. And then he stood there and didn't leave, and I got very interested in the paperwork on the clipboard, which was blank. You're still counting that fan, he said. It's a good fan. He almost laughed. He didn't. He put his hands in his pockets. Okay, he said. Good night, Emery. Then he went out the bay door, and I sat down on a pallet of cardstock for I don't know how long, and I'll tell you what I was doing, but you have to understand it's not romantic. I was going through everything I'd said out loud in that building for 4 years, and figuring out which parts he could have already heard about. I avoided him for 3 days. That's easy in Bellwood Junction if you're committed. There's the one grocery, so you go to the Kroger out on 9. There's the one laundromat, and his mother owns it, so you drive to Norwalk with a hamper on the passenger seat like a lunatic, which I did, twice. He didn't come by. He didn't call. He didn't do the thing where a man leaves you 6 messages and then tells you he's giving you space. There was just a coffee on the ledge outside the employee door every afternoon, sitting there waiting on me when I came in. Hazelnut. 3 sugars. Whipped cream on the top of it, in July, in a car cup, getting warm in the sun for however long it had sat. That is what I drank when I was 23 years old. That is exactly what I drank, down to the number of sugars, and if you had woken me up at 3 in the morning in 2021 and asked me my order, I'd have said it in my sleep. I don't drink it now. I haven't drunk it in 4 years. It tastes like a candle. So the first day, I laughed at it. The second day I stood there with it in my hand for a while, and then poured it in the grass by the dock, which I felt bad about, and then went inside. The third day I sat in the truck and looked at it on the ledge from 30 feet away and didn't get out. He wasn't asking me anything. He hadn't asked me one question. He was just running on what he had, which was old, and he was running on it every single afternoon, at the ledge, before shift, and he was going to keep doing it. I had a pad of stickers in the glove box for job tags. I wrote on one, and I stuck it on the underside of the cup, where nobody but him would find it, because if you're going to do something like that, you may as well be a coward about it, and I went in and worked 10 hours. I switched to black in 2022. Try again. Next day, black coffee, no cup sleeve, too hot to hold, and a note, noted, A. I put that one in my wallet. It's still in my wallet. It has been through the wash. 8 days after that. The Mihal got me. Nothing dramatic. They'd rigged the guard back on and it was worse than before. And a roller took my cuff and took my wrist with it about half a turn before Dale hit the stop. My hand went one way it isn't supposed to go and then came back. I said a couple of things. Everybody stood around. Somebody called it in, because after junior you call things in. I sat on a stool by the trim table holding my own wrist, and I knew exactly what was about to walk through the door, and I was already at the top of the stairs in my head, counting. He crouched down in front of me. He looked at the wrist through the cloth for about a second and a half. That sleeve has to come up, he said. I know. I can cut it or you can roll it. It's a good shirt, I said. Okay. So I rolled it. I've thought about that 400 times, and the shape of it never changes. I rolled it up myself, in the light, in my own shop, and I had 6 of them and I knew where every one of them was. And he did not look down. He looked at my face. He held my hand and my elbow and he looked at my face, and I watched him understand that whatever he'd been putting together for 4 years was worse than he'd put together, and he did not look down at my arm. 3 seconds. I counted 3. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want me to stop? He said. Keep going? He kept going. He wrapped the wrist. He told me it wasn't broken and that I should get it looked at anyway, and that I wasn't going to. He signed something on a clipboard. Then he pulled my sleeve back down over it himself and buttoned the cuff, and he stood up, and he said, "Ice it tonight," and he left. And then he didn't say one word about it for 2 weeks. 14 days. I counted those too. The 2 rules happened in my kitchen, which I should explain is not a kitchen. It's a galley with a 2-burner and a window over the sink that looks at the side of the Baptist annex. He came by on a Tuesday, which is one of the 2 days a week Corwin doesn't have me. The other one is Thursday, and Thursday is spoken for. He had a bag of pears, because his mother had a tree, and there is nothing in this world you can do with that many pears. 1 night a week, he said. I won't ask you about anything. Anything before June. I stood there with a pear in my hand like a man in a painting. 2 rules, I said. Okay. 1. You don't ask about the scars. Okay. 2. You don't come in this kitchen in the uniform. He put the bag down on the counter. Why? Psychological reasons. That's not a reason. It's 2 words and they're both long, I said. It's the best I've got. Fine, he said. Not in the kitchen. He got the water running to wash his hands, which he does the second he's inside anywhere, every time, like a man coming out of surgery in 1953. I'm not agreeing to the first one. You just said. I said I wouldn't ask you. And there it is. That's the whole thing. That's the entire 5 months, right there, in 6 words, at my sink, with the water running. I heard it. I want to be clear that I heard it exactly the way you just heard it. Okay, I said. I cut up the pears. We watched most of a movie about submarines. The one about the bleachers he got from Coach Pruitt. I found out because he came over the following week with grass on his shoes, in a town where nobody's grass needs cutting in August, and because Bellwood Junction is 9,000 people, and Coach Pruitt's neighbor's daughter runs the counter at the parts store. Denny Pruitt taught junior high health and coached the JV. He retired in 2016. He waters his lawn at 6 in the evening with his thumb over the end of the hose because he has never bought a nozzle in his life. He said one sentence about me to about 30 boys on the bleachers in the spring of my freshman year. Just the one. He said it in the voice menus when they want the whole group in on it. I've never repeated it to anybody. I didn't repeat it to Anders. I'm not going to repeat it to you either, and I know how that sounds, like I'm holding out on you, and I'm not. It's 4 words long, and it's boring, and if I say it out loud, you'll hear how boring it is, and you'll wonder what was wrong with me. That's it. That's the whole of it. The bleachers. I was 15. Anders sat on my counter with a beer he wasn't drinking and said, I don't like your old coach. I had my back to him at the sink. Why? No reason, he said. I ran the water a while. He's got a bad lawn, Anders said. Whole thing's yellow. He waters it like an idiot. You went and stood in his yard. I went and looked at a truck he's selling. He's not selling a truck. He might be now, he said. I made him an offer. I laughed. Get that down, because it matters later. I laughed, in my own kitchen, at a man who had just gone through my 9th grade year behind my back with a hose running. Thursdays I go to a thing in the basement of the Methodist Church on Sandusky Street. It's not the churches, they just have the room. 8 of us, sometimes 5. Tamsin Odabashian has been in that basement longer than me. She's 41. She manages the pharmacy counter. She has a laugh like a car door. She is the only person on earth allowed to say anything to me. I told them about the coffee and the sticky note and Pruitt's lawn because I was proud of it. I want that on the record. I brought it in there like a kid with a frog in a jar. Tamsin, let me finish. Then she set her styrofoam cup down on the floor, which is what she does before she takes somebody apart. So the paramedic ex-boyfriend, she said, is running a cold case investigation on your body, and you find this romantic. When you say it out loud, it sounds bad. I said it exactly as loud as you're living it. The whole room went. Barry in the folding chair by the coffee maker actually had to take his glasses off. And I laughed too. That's the part. I laughed until my eyes went, and I said, it's a little romantic, and Tamsin said, it's a little romantic, and then she said, sugar, when it stops being funny, you come find me first, not last. And somebody changed the subject to a woman's brother-in-law's boat. So that's on the record too. Somebody said it to my face in August, in a church basement, in the exact words, and I brought a frog in a jar. Halloran Coin Laundry is on Perry between the tax place and the empty storefront that used to be a florist. 14 washers. 9 dryers. A sign in the window that says no dyeing that somebody has been correcting the spelling of, and back again since the 90s. Ingrid Halloran has run it since before I was born. She's tall like her son. She has opinions about detergent that she will share with you unprompted and at length. I was in there on a Sunday for the machine that does comforters, and she was folding towels, and she said, "You know what I always think about with you. That's how it comes. Never a warning. I always think about the year you sat in here every night. Ma'am? You were 16, maybe. You'd come in about 8 and sit in the chair by the second dryer, and you'd be here till I locked up." She squared a towel on the corners. "You never washed a thing. Not one time. And I never said a word about it because it's warm in here, and it's loud in here, and I figured you needed one or the other." She folded another towel. "You want to know the truth? It was nice for me," she said. Anders was out doing whatever a boy does. It was somebody to be quiet with. Then she asked me if I'd tried the pods, which she does not recommend. Now, my mother had a run of about 3 years in there. It wasn't every week. It was every so often, and the every so often is what made it hard, because you can't plan around a maybe, so you just stay gone from 8 until 11 every night, for 3 years to be safe. The laundry room. I was 16. Ingrid was not telling him anything. Ingrid was folding towels. I want to be fair to her. She was folding towels and she'd have said the same thing to a man buying a bus ticket. But she has a son who listens like it's a trade. 2 days later, there was a box on my kitchen table. I hadn't given him a key. My screen door doesn't lock, and hasn't since 2019, and everybody in that building knows it. It was a white noise machine. $40, maybe. Little round thing with a dial, 3 settings, one of them called rain and one of them called something they were spelling fan. No note. Nothing in the box but the machine and the plug and a piece of cardboard telling me not to submerge it in water. I want to tell you the first thing I felt, and it's ugly, and I'm going to tell you anyway because otherwise none of the rest of this makes sense. I was ashamed, not moved, not undone. My face went hot standing over my own kitchen table, and I looked at the window over the sink like somebody was going to be standing in it. I called him. He answered on the second ring, in the truck, with the radio on. "Who told you?" He didn't answer. "Anders." "Who told you?" "Does it change what it's for?" he said. I hung up on him. Then I texted him about the pears, because I'm a coward, and he texted back a picture of a pear. I left the machine on the table, and I did not plug it in. I ate over the sink. I did dishes. I read about 9 pages of a paperback and put it down. I went past that table on the way to the bathroom, and on the way back, and on the way to the fridge and on the way back. 4 times. I counted the times I walked past it, which is a thing I do, and I want you to know that I knew I was doing it and I did not stop doing it. Here's what was in my head, and it isn't noble. It was, a man drove to a store and stood in an aisle and thought about the year I was 16. He looked at a shelf and he thought about that, and he did it without asking me one thing, so I couldn't even lie to him about it. You can't be grateful for something like that. There's nowhere to put it. 3 in the morning I got up and plugged it in. It's a stupid sound. It doesn't sound like rain and it doesn't sound like a fan. It sounds like the inside of a shell. It sounded like 14 washers running and one woman folding towels in a chair by the second dryer. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and I cried like a man throwing up. First time in 4 years. I want to say one thing to you about it and then leave it alone. Don't feel sorry for me yet. I'm asking you as a favor. Not yet. I told him about the parking lot myself. Nobody found that one. And I need you to understand why. Because it wasn't courage. It was because of the machine. I'd rather hand a man a thing than watch him find it in a shelf in a store in the next town over. So the next Tuesday I got 2 chairs out on the concrete stoop, which is the closest I have to a porch, and I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to stay where you are while I do it." "Okay, don't get up." "I'm not going to get up," he said. I was 17. There was a man named Brother Dwight Rasco who did the youth thing at the church out on 250, and somebody put a word in his ear about me, and my mother agreed to it because she was scared, and because he was very sure, and she has never in her life known what to do with a very sure man. 4 hours in the gravel lot behind that building, in the car, and then out of the car, and then walking the fence line. Praying is what he'd call it. Praying with me. He had a hand on my shoulder for a lot of it, and it wasn't rough. That's not what this is. He never once raised his voice. Nobody touched me. 4 hours. I went in, and there was less of me after. I don't know how to say it better than that. That's it. That's the sentence. I've had 10 years to build a better one, and that's still the one I've got. The parking lot. I was 17. He didn't say anything. He didn't say times I'm sorry times, and he didn't say times that wasn't your fault times, and he didn't say a single one of the things that make you have to be polite about your own life. He turned his hand over on his knee, palm up, and waited. I took it, and I felt it. Right then, right there, on my own stoop, with the streetlight doing what it does. A ridge in his right palm, a long one, running from under the little finger down across to the base of the thumb. Not a new thing. Old and settled and hard, the way they go. I traced it. Start to finish, once, with 2 fingers, because I count things, and a thing like that is a thing to be counted. 1. And in about a second and a half, I built myself a little explanation, standing right there in my own head, out of nothing. Glass, a car door, a bad night with a stretcher, some job thing, something from the work. Men who do that work have hands like a cutting board. So I said, occupational hazard, huh? Something like that, he said. And I let it go. That's the whole beat. And I know it doesn't look like anything. He had a rule, and I had a rule, and mine ran both directions, and I was proud of that. I was times proud. I sat on that stoop holding a man's hand with my thumb on the one thing about him I'd never seen before, and I decided that not asking was a kindness, and I gave it to him like a gift, and we sat out there another hour talking about a woman at the Kroger. I would think about that hour, later, more than I've thought about almost anything. The bad shift was in September, and it takes 90 seconds to tell. He was supposed to be over at 9. He came at 11:30 in the uniform, which was against the rules, and he stopped in the doorway when he remembered that, and I said, "Get in here." So he got in. He sat down at my table. His hands smelled like the pink soap they use, that stuff that gets into the skin and stays, and he didn't say anything. 2 minutes. He didn't ask me about my day, and he didn't say the thing about the pears, and he didn't put his hands under the tap, which he does every time he walks into any room, which I had watched him do 8 weeks running. He just sat with his forearms on my table and looked at the middle of it. Here's what I had. I want you to appreciate what I had. I had no training, no words, no good ideas, and one habit that has embarrassed me since I was 9 years old. Sit down, I said. He was already sitting down. You're sitting down, okay. I'll count something out loud till you're back. I'm good at it. It's the only thing I'm good at. He looked up. It's 11:40, he said. I'm fine. Okay, I said. And I put it away. I stood up and ran the water, and did 4 dishes that were already clean. And after a while he went and got a beer he didn't open. And around 1 in the morning he said something about a dog somebody had in the back of a car, and we were fine. That was it. That's the whole scene. I offered and he told me what time it was, and I let it go, because his rules and my rules were the same rules, and I have never in my life pushed on a closed door. The roof of Corwin & Sons is flat with gravel on it, and there's a ladder on the east wall the town would shut us down over. Everybody on second shift goes up there. There's a lawn chair up there from before I worked at that place. October. Cold enough that you sit close and pretend it's about the wind. I was counting the stars over the water tower out loud because I was nervous, and I got to 9 and then said 11 and then stopped. That was wrong, I said. I know. You were counting them too. No, he said. I was counting you counting. So I said it. I'm not going to dress it up. I said, I want this to be a thing. The actual thing. I'm too old to keep bringing a man pears. He didn't say anything for a second. He had his hands in his coat. I want to say yes, he said. I'm not going to yet. I laughed, because that's the noise I make. You've been out of the hospital 4 years, he said. You've been in therapy 1. I've been back in your life for 3 months. If I say yes tonight, I'll never know if you chose me, or if you just needed something to hold on to. 4 years. 1. 3 months. He said it like a man reading numbers off a form, in order, and he didn't stumble on one of them. That is the most condescending kind thing anybody has ever said to me, I said. I know. I practiced in the truck. How many times? Enough. Enough. And then he took my hand, which is a bad way to lose an argument, and we sat up there another 20 minutes, and neither one of us said anything else about it. I was right, and he was right, and I've had a long time to sit with the fact that those aren't the same as each other. The notebook was in November, and it takes even less time. He'd hung his shirt over my chair. Paramedics carry a little spiral thing in the breast pocket, the kind with the wire on top, for writing down numbers at somebody's kitchen table at 4 a.m, heart rate, blood pressure, the time again. It came out of the pocket when I moved the chair, and it landed open. I picked it up, and it was numbers, mostly. Pages and pages of numbers with slashes in them, which is a strange thing to hold, all those strangers' worst hour in a man's handwriting in pencil. And then one page that wasn't numbers. 3 words, printed, no capitals, no sentence, one under the other, bleachers, laundry, lot. I didn't ask him about it. I closed the notebook and put it back in the breast pocket, and squared the shirt on the chair the way it had been, and I sat down at my own table. Then I counted the panes in the window over the sink. It's a 6/6, which is 12. I counted them 4 times and got 12 every time, which didn't help. Room 12 he got from Hirsch Coyle, which I could have told him was coming. Hirsch is 70-something and runs the garage on Water Street and has never once considered whether a thing was his to say. 19. I was 19. My mother's boyfriend that year had a rule about the house, and she went along with the rule, and I lived 4 months at the Starlight Court out on Route 9, room 12, $41 a week off season, and I worked at the car wash and the dairy mart, and did nights sweeping at the elementary school. There was a night in that room in February. Nobody's ever known about that night. Not Hirsch, not my mother, not anybody, and I'll get to it eventually, but not here, because that's not what this part is. Anders drove out there. The Starlight's been closed since 2020. Chain across the lot, plywood on the windows, the sign still up with half the neon gone so it says Arlight. You can see it from the highway. He stood in that lot for 40 minutes. I know because I know what time he left his mother's, and I know what time he got to my place, and I did that math about 9 times. He came in and washed his hands. He stood at the sink with his back to me a while. You were 19, he said. I was 19, and I was in this town the whole time. 2 miles away. He turned the water off. 2.5, I said. It's 2.5 miles. That was a joke. It was supposed to be a joke. His shoulders went, and he put the heel of his hand up against his eye and pressed it there hard, and he was breathing through his mouth, and he said okay to nobody. I got up and I put my hand on his shoulder. He was out the screen door before my arm was all the way down. Not fast, not angry. He set the towel on the counter first, and then he went, and the door did the thing it does where it doesn't catch, and then it caught. I stayed in the kitchen. He stayed out on that stoop about 25 minutes with his elbows on his knees, and I watched the back of his head through the glass. That was twice. I have thought about the arithmetic of that more than is good for me. He would come inside a burning room for anybody in this county. Twice I put a hand on him, and both times he found a door. Number 5 he brought up himself, and that's the one I still can't get all the way around. Early December, my kitchen, no beers, both of us on the floor, because the chair situation in my apartment has always been a scandal. He'd been off 2 days. He looked like he hadn't been off 2 days. I found 4, he said. I didn't say anything. 3 I went looking for. 1 you gave me. He had his hands flat on his knees. Number 5. I've been driving around this town for a month. I talked to people I had no business talking to. Your old boss at the car wash. A woman who used to live in your mother's building. Somebody's aunt. Anders. There's nothing to find, he said. There's no place. There's no name. The clock over the stove is one of those that clicks. I heard it click about 6 times. Because he was right. He'd gotten all the way to the middle of it, the actual middle, and there was nothing in there. I was 22. It was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I had a job and a paid electric bill and a girl at work who liked me in the way that's a problem, and I'd been fine for about 14 months, and nothing happened that week. Nothing happened the week before either. I want to be very clear that nothing happened. It's the smallest one, you'd have to be looking. There's no story, I said. That's not you missing it. It's the one where there's nothing to miss. He nodded slowly, like he was filing it. What do I do with that? He said. You're asking me? Yes. Well, don't, I said. You're the one with the truck and the training and you've got a whole radio. You're supposed to know. He shook his head. I'm a paramedic, he said. I'm not your doctor. And he said it plain, like a man reading his own name off a badge, and I have never once been able to argue with him when he does that. So, I said the thing I've never said to Tamsin, or in that basement, or out loud in a room with the lights on. The other 5 have reasons, I said. Every one of them's got a place and a year, and a person. 5 doesn't. Which means it could just happen. On a Tuesday. For nothing. He didn't move. Or it means you were sick, he said. And sick things don't need a reason. Nobody asks a fever what it's angry about. The thing that did it was a form. I want you to know that. Not a letter, not a box in an attic, not somebody breaking down and telling me. A county form on a clipboard in the middle of a Monday. I'm shift lead now. I have been since the spring, which means 12 cents an hour and the paperwork nobody else will do. Junior came back to work in October with a hand that doesn't close all the way and a story he tells at parties. And in January the county finally sent the follow-up on his accident, the long version, because there was an OSHA thing about the guard, and it landed on me because I was the one on the floor. 9 pages. Ohio has a form for everything, and every one of them has a page 2. Halfway down page 2 there's a box. Caller on scene name, age, relationship to patient. You'd think that would be for the ambulance to fill in. It isn't. It's for the shift lead, because the county wants it in the handwriting of whoever was standing there. So I wrote it. Emery Dockery, 27, co-worker. Printed it in the little squares. Dated it, ate a sandwich. Signed 3 more pages and drove home at midnight. I have a drawer, bottom of the dresser, under a sweater I don't wear. There's a discharge packet in it from 4 years ago that I have never read past the first page. The first page is billing. I know the first page, like a hymn. I don't know what made me go into that drawer that night. I've tried to build a reason, and I can't. I got home and put my keys down and went and got it, the way you'd go get a jacket. Same form, same county, same layout, same little squares. Page 2, caller on scene, male, 25. Present at scene. And it wasn't a shock, that's the thing. It wasn't a bolt of anything, because your body works it out before you do. I was sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, with the packet open on my knees, and my hands were already going. Male, 25. I was 23. He was 25. He'd been gone. He'd been gone 4 hours by then. He had a bag in the car and a job in Columbus, and my mother told me for 4 years that he got in that car and drove and never turned around, and she never had to say it twice because it was easy to believe. Somebody made a phone call from inside my apartment that night. I counted the squares in the box for the caller's age. 2 squares. I sat on that floor a long time. He came over the next evening after shift. He'd stopped in the doorway to take the jacket off, and I was standing in my kitchen with that packet on the table, face up, open to page 2. He looked at it. He didn't ask what it was. He knew what it was from the letterhead and the shape of it, and he stood in that doorway with his coat half off. Sit down, I said. He sat down. Was it you? Yes. I don't know what I was expecting. Something. A hand over the face, a chair pushed back, a Times let me explain. He put his hands flat on my kitchen table and looked at me and answered the question I'd asked him. Tell me the whole thing, I said, front to back. Don't manage me. Okay. And then he told it like a report. That's the only way I can describe it. Flat, in order, times included, nothing left out and nothing decorated. The way he'd hand a patient over at the door of an emergency room to somebody who has 9 seconds to listen. I left your place at 10:15, he said. I had the car packed. I got on 250, and then I got on 71 South and I drove 90 minutes. I was past Mansfield. You texted me at 11. You texted me at 11, he said. You said, I'm fine, go. He turned his hand over. 3 words. I've had 4 years of people saying 3 words to me at their kitchen table. Nobody who's fine says it in 3 words. He shook his head once. I didn't know that then. I wasn't anything then. I was 25 and I worked at a warehouse. I just knew. So you turned around. Not right off, he said. I got off at Mount Gilead, and I sat in a gas station lot with the engine running, and I read those 3 words about 40 times. I turned around at 12:35. He put his thumb on the edge of the table. It's 2:19 when I'm at your door. He said the time. He didn't explain it, and he didn't apologize for it. The door was locked, he said. Both of them. I knocked and then I hit the door with the flat of my hand for a while, and a woman upstairs put her light on and told me to quit. I went around the back, and the bathroom window on the alley side was the one that never sat right in the frame. It's up over the trash cans. I got up on the cans, and I broke the window with my right hand, and I got in through it. He said that part in exactly the same voice as the exit number. Same voice. That's what I'm telling you. Same voice for the exit number and the window. Then what? I called 911 at 2:29. I stayed on with them the whole time. He was looking at the middle of the table now. They were 22 minutes out because the crew was on 20 with a rollover. That's the county for you at 2 in the morning. Anders. You were awake, he said. That's the part I need you to have. You were awake and you were talking to me. Not making sense, but talking. I don't remember any of it. I know. I don't remember 1 second of it. I know you don't, he said. You asked me if I'd eaten. Then he stopped for a second, and it was the only time he stopped. So I said the time, he said. That's all I had. I didn't know one useful thing yet. I didn't know a single thing I know now. So I said the time out loud, and I said it every minute, so you'd have something to come back to. For how long? 11 minutes. You counted. I said it 11 times, he said. It's 2:41. You're okay. Stay with me. It's 2:42. He put his hands back flat on the table. They got there at 2:51. I rode in front. I sat in the 3rd chair from the door of that waiting room until past 6 in the morning, and a woman came by twice with a cart and asked if I wanted a coffee, and I said no both times, which I've thought about since, because I could have used a coffee. That was the only joke he made, and he didn't smile at it. And then my mother came, I said. Charlene came at 10 after 6. What did she say? He didn't want to. That's the one place in the whole thing where he didn't want to. And he did it anyway, because I'd told him front to back and he'd said okay. She didn't yell, he said. She was very quiet. There were people around. Anders. She said, Andy, look what you did to him. Don't be here when he wakes up. Andy. Nobody has ever called that man Andy. Not his mother. Not the department. Not a teacher. Not one person in 29 years. And it went past me at the time, sitting at that table, and it didn't come back around on me for weeks. And you left. I was 25, he said. I believed her. He turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the table and left it there. I went to Columbus and I did the program in the spring. 2 years on a truck in Franklin County, and then a spot opened here. He looked up. I got good at keeping strangers breathing. I couldn't sit in a room with you. Then he said, You asked me once how many scars I have. I didn't remember asking. I never asked. He was giving me a thing I hadn't done. He put his right hand out on my kitchen table and turned it over. Palm up, fingers open. 1, he said. You've been holding it since August. It was raining. It had been raining the whole time and I hadn't heard it, and I heard it then, on the roof of that building, which is tin over the kitchen because whoever built it ran out of money. I looked at his hand. And here's what I need you to understand, and it's the worst thing in this story, and it isn't the form and it isn't my mother. It wasn't a surprise. I knew that scar was there. I found it in August, on my own stoop, with my own 2 fingers, and I traced it end to end. And I counted it, 1, because I count things. And I built myself a little story about a car door out of nothing at all. And I said times occupational hazard. Huh. And I let a man tell me times something like that. And then we talked about a woman at the Kroger for an hour. 5 months. 4 years I carried 6 of them by myself and called it my business. 5 months I sat in a kitchen with a man carrying one by himself and called it manners. I felt it, I said. In August, I felt it and I made a joke. I know. Why didn't you? You had a rule, he said. I didn't cry. I want that in the record, because I've been accused of building myself up in this, and I'm not building myself up here. I didn't cry, and I didn't put my hand on his hand. I stood up and got the coffee pot and poured what was left of it down the sink, which was nothing, which I was doing to have something in my hands. I saw your notebook, I said. He didn't move. In November, it fell out of your shirt. Bleachers, laundry, lot. I put the pot in the sink. 3 words in a book full of vitals. That's not a list of places, Anders. I know what that is. You were writing an incident report. That's not. You were filling in what you missed. I turned around. You didn't come back for me, I said. You came back for that night. He sat there. Say something. I'm listening. Don't listen. Listening is what you do to strangers on a floor. My hands were going again. 4 hours you sat in a lot with Rasko's name in your head. 40 minutes you stood in front of a boarded-up motel. You went and found a retired gym teacher and looked at a truck he doesn't own. You did all of it without asking me one question, and you know what that is? That's a man working a scene. Emery, I'm not your penance, Anders. I said it too loud for that kitchen. There's 9 feet of it. I've been somebody's fault my whole life, I said. My mother's, Rasko's, Pruitt's, for about a week. I'm not going to be somebody's redemption too. I can't hold both ends of that. He put his hands in his lap. He looked at me the way he looks at people, straight on, and he didn't reach for anything and he didn't raise his voice one notch, and that's what did it. That's what took my legs out. If he'd argued, I could have kept going for an hour. Okay, he said. Okay? You're not all the way wrong. And that should have been the end of it. That's the door right there. That's where a man goes out the door. But there was one more thing and it came up out of me sideways and quiet, and it wasn't part of the case I'd built. I hadn't even known I still had it. I offered to count for you, I said. One time. In September. You came in here at 11:30, and you sat at this table, and you couldn't talk. And I offered you the one thing I've got. He didn't say anything. You told me what time it was. Nothing in his face. I watched for it and there was nothing, and his hand on the table went closed, and that was all. He stood up. He got his coat off the back of the chair. At the door he stopped with his hand on the frame and he said, "It's 9:20. And then he said, "Good night, Emery." And he went out into the rain and pulled the screen door until it caught. 9 weeks. I'm going to tell you what 9 weeks actually looks like, because I've heard how people tell this part, and it's always a man in a chair with the lights off. I went to work. I went every shift. I ran the melee with the new guard on it that cost the company $4,000 and made everybody 16% slower. I did the paperwork. I ate. I lost about 6 pounds, which I've been trying to lose since 2019, and I want you to know that I noticed, and I was petty about it. I went to that basement every Thursday. I went 2 days later, actually. I drove there with my hands shaking on the wheel, and I sat in the parking lot and then I went in. And I started rolling my sleeves up in my own apartment. Just in there, with the door shut. That was in the 2nd week. I don't know why that was the week. I called my mother in the 3rd week. I'm not going to give you the whole call. It was 50 minutes and 40 of them were about a cousin's kitchen remodel, because that's how it's done in my family. You put 40 minutes of tile down first. Then I asked her about that morning at the hospital. She went quiet a long time, and Charlene Dockery is not a quiet woman. Then she said, "I don't remember what I said to him." "I do. Don't call me that." Another long one. "I was so scared I made it your fault," she said. "And then I made it his." That was it. That was the whole of what she had, and it took her 4 years to get it out of the ground. And I sat on my kitchen floor with the phone and I said, "Okay, Mama. She's not a monster." I want to say that clearly one time, because I've spent a lot of my life being the only person willing to say it. She was 39 years old in a hallway at 6 in the morning, and she said the worst thing she'll ever say, and she has no idea she said it. She doesn't know she called him Andy. She never will, because I'm not going to be the one that does that to her. We talked about the tile some more, and then we hung up. Tamsin, week 5, in the parking lot afterward with her keys in her hand. Say it. Say what? Say, I miss him, she said. Then stop. Nothing after it. I miss him, which is stupid, because, nope, I miss him, and I know that's, nope, I miss him but, not a chance. I miss him, and honestly the whole thing was, sugar. She leaned on her car door. We're going to stand out here in the cold until you can say 3 words like a grown man. 11 times. It took 11 times. I counted them out loud because I count things, and by about number 7 she was counting with me. And at 11 I said, I miss him, and then I shut my mouth, and I stood there in a church parking lot in the cold feeling like a fool. There he is, she said. Then she got in her car and drove away, because she had to be at the pharmacy at 7 in the morning. Week 7 I was in the laundromat. Ingrid had 4 dryers going and a cart of towels she was working through the way she does, corner to corner, and she didn't look up. He's got a Tuesday thing now, she said. 4 o'clock. I kept my eyes on my own machine. He doesn't tell me about it and I don't ask. She squared a towel and put it on the stack, and then she asked me whether I'd started using less detergent, which she has been telling me to do since 2016. That's all I ever got. That is the entire amount of information I have ever been given about that, from anybody, ever. He has never once mentioned it to me. Not that night, not since, not on the anniversary of anything. 9 weeks, and then it was March, and he came to the shop in the middle of the afternoon. Daylight. 2:40 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, with the bay doors open. He was in a flannel and jeans and he'd shaved and he was not in the uniform, and he had nothing in his hands. I came out to the loading dock, and we stood there in the sun. I did what you said, he said. I went and found out why I came back. And? You were half right. I waited. I came back for that night, he said. I stayed for the guy who left a sticky note under a coffee cup. Somebody dropped a skid inside, and we both flinched, and it was almost funny. Where's the notebook? I said. I stopped writing in it. That's not the same as. No, it isn't, he said. I stopped writing in it. He put his hands in his pockets, which he does instead of doing anything else. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. And I'm not asking you to take me back, because we were never really together. We were 19, and hiding in a garage. So I'm asking for something else. Dale went by with the pallet jack. Can I take you to dinner? I didn't say anything. I couldn't have. Not as an apology. As a Tuesday. It rained that night. That tin over my kitchen. Same sound as 4 years ago. Exactly the same. Because it's the same roof, and it hasn't been fixed, and it never will be. But there were 2 of us in the room and every light in the place was on, because I'd gone around and put them on before he got there, and I didn't explain that and he didn't ask. I told him about the 6th one. In my own words, out loud, first time in my life. I'm not going to tell you what I did that night. I've never told anybody, and I'm not going to start with you. And it isn't a secret so much as it's nobody's. Here's what I told him. I told him it wasn't about dying. I need somebody to hear that. I did not want to be dead. I wanted the day to stop. That's all it was. It had been a day about 19 hours long, and it had my mother in it, and a man in a car with a bag in the back seat, and a shift I'd been fired off of, and by 2 in the morning I wanted the day to stop the way you want a phone to quit ringing. And at 23, I could not tell those 2 things apart. I did not know they were 2 things. Nobody had ever sat me down and told me they were 2 different things, and I want to say something ugly here. I'm not sure I'd have believed them. That's it. That's the 6th one. The night it rained. I was 23. Then I took his right hand off his knee, and I turned it over, and I put it flat against my face, palm on my cheek, the ridge of it under my eye. Put it down, I said. It was never yours. He came apart. I have never seen it before, and I have not seen it since. He didn't make much noise. He got his other hand over his mouth and his shoulders went, and he leaned forward until his forehead was against my collarbone, and the whole thing was nearly silent, which is the loudest thing I've ever been in a room with. And I didn't say one wise thing. I didn't have one. "There's 4 panes in that window," I said. "No. 6 over 6, so that's 12. "It's 12. I've counted them. There's 9 slats in the blind. There's 9. There's the pairs. There's 4 pairs in that bowl. And 2 of them are done for." He was still going. "There's okay. There's a lot of rain. Emery, I'm not done," I said. 19, 20. And he let me. He stayed right where he was with his face against my shirt and my hand on the back of his head, and he let me count out loud in my own kitchen until I ran out, which took a while, because I can go a long time. 16 months. It's July again. It's 94 degrees again, and I'm going to tell you that this town has one kind of weather, and it is this. Same ceiling fan at Corwin and Sons. They will replace that building before they replace that fan. I got dressed in the morning, and I put on a shirt, and I rolled the sleeves up past the elbow and I left them there. Then I went outside. 3 blocks, Perry to Water to the light at 250 and back. At 11 in the morning, in the sun with my arms bare, and a woman coming out of the tax place looked. She looked at my arm and then up at my face and then away, the whole thing in about a second and a half, and that's all it was, and she got in her car. I didn't pull it down. Every other Thursday we teach a first aid class in his mother's laundromat. Free. There's a sign in the window under the no D'ing one. About 9 people come, and 2 of them are always the same 2 women who come for the company. Ingrid does not shut the machines off for it. 14 washers and 9 dryers running the whole hour, and Anders has to raise his voice, which he hates. He does the compressions. He's got the dummy from the fire department, and he does the thing where he makes everybody hum a song out loud so they get the rate right, and grown men will not do it, and he waits them out. He always waits them out. I do the other part, the part nobody teaches. How to sit down next to somebody who is not okay and not try to fix them. How to not ask. How to ask. I have about 11 minutes of material, and I've been running it for over a year, and I still can't get it down clean, and I always end up saying times I don't know how to say this better than that times about halfway through, which I've decided is part of the class now. Last Thursday, there was a kid in the back row. 16, maybe. Long sleeves. He wasn't washing anything. He came in about 10 after, and sat in the chair by the second dryer, and he stayed till we stacked the chairs. Nobody said a word to him. Not Ingrid, not Anders, not me, not one word. I just left the door open. It's 8:04 on a Thursday. I've got 6 scars, and he knows the name of every one of them. He's the only person alive who says my whole name. I still count things. I just don't stop at 6 anymore.